Yo, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be giving my NFL DraftKings picks for Week 6. Before we get started looking at this Week 6 slate, I said this last week, but just want to thank you guys again for all the good feedback, all the good support I got on my last video, my Week 5 video. That video got over 450 likes. I asked you guys, I said, can we break 400 likes? You guys definitely did that, got 450 likes on the last video. So thank you guys so much for that. I do really appreciate it. For this video, gonna try and go a little crazy. Let's see if we can get over 500 likes. That would just be absolutely insane if we could break that. So if you are watching this video, make sure you drop a like on the video. Would really appreciate it. Also, if this is your first time on my channel, be sure to subscribe as well. I do these NFL videos every week, so make sure you are subscribed so that way you'll never miss out on any new videos. And I also will be doing NBA videos daily whenever the NBA regular season starts. So if you do play NBA DFS, like I said, make sure you subscribe. You are going to want to be subscribed so that way you'll never miss out on any of my new videos. But yeah, thank you guys so much again for all the good feedback, all the likes on my last video. Let's try and shoot for over 500 likes on this video. Would definitely be awesome if we could do that. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started looking at this Week 6 slate. Alright, so looking at quarterback this week for Week 6, I don't think this is going to be a position where you look to pay down this week. There are not a ton of good quarterbacks I'm seeing like under 6K that I have a lot of interest in. So I think you are going to have to spend at quarterback this week. Tom Brady's leading the pack this week at 8,300. He gets to face the Jets. Obviously, it's a great spot for Brady, but he is definitely expensive. 8,300, a lot to pay for a quarterback. I would much rather just spend that on an expensive running back. If I'm going to pay over 8K for a player, I think I'd much rather be at running back or a wide receiver. So I'm not going to have a ton of interest in Brady. I like this range right here from Rodgers down to Watson. Maybe not Matt Ryan, take him out of that. Matt Ryan just hasn't really been that good this year, but Rodgers, BREES, Cousins, and Watson, I wrote all four of these guys down. Have a lot of interest in all four of these guys. Starting off with Aaron Rodgers, he is a core play for me this week. I'm not sure if I'll be on an island by myself here. I'm not sure if people are going to want to pick on Minnesota's defense, but they haven't been as good against the pass this year as they have in past years. And Aaron Rodgers is just one of the best quarterbacks in the league. This guy's pretty much matchup proof. If you just look at his fantasy scoring this year, over 20 DraftKings points in every single game this year. Aaron Rodgers, one of the most consistent, solid quarterbacks in the league. Through 5 games this year, 20, 23, 28, 23, and 24 DraftKings points. Just so solid, so consistent, great cash game play. And Rodgers is obviously viable for GPPs. He does have a pretty high ceiling, can definitely get it 30 plus, put up 28.82 against Cincinnati. So Rodgers is always valuable in all formats. And I think this could be another game where Rodgers is going to have to throw the ball a lot, especially if Ty Montgomery misses this game. I would expect the Packers to lean heavily on Rodgers. He could have to throw the ball 40 to 50 times. I don't think Green Bay is going to have a lot of success running the ball against Minnesota. So I think Rodgers is a great play here. He's a core play for me. I'm going to go ahead and plug him into the core. 7,300, I think that's reasonable price tag to pay for Rodgers, especially because of how consistent he's been this year. And I'm not sure how popular he's going to be. I feel like people might go a little bit cheaper, probably go to Deshaun Watson. I feel like Deshaun Watson's going to be pretty chalky this week because of how well he's played in the past few weeks. And I definitely think Watson's a good play this week. But if I'm going to pay that much for a quarterback, I'll just find a little bit more salary, get up to Aaron Rodgers, who I'm just a lot more confident in. I know is going to produce for me, who I know has a very high floor. So Aaron Rodgers is a core play for me, locking him in at 7,300. But looking at those other quarterbacks I mentioned, I definitely like Drew Brees for 100 less. I think if you want to go a little bit contrarian, Drew Brees, I don't know, he might actually be higher owned than Rodgers since Brees is playing at home. We know Drew Brees plays well at home, so I think Brees is definitely a viable option this week as well. He's another quarterback that's been pretty consistent this year. Has had some tough games against Minnesota, against Miami, didn't do much in those, but 25 DraftKings points against the Patriots, 20 against Carolina. And in Brees' one home game this year against the Patriots was his best game, put up 25.24 DK points in that game. So I think Drew Brees is definitely in play here. Like I said, playing at home in the Superdome, we know Brees plays very well there. I think this game could have some high shootout potential. I think both sides of this game are in play. I like some Lions as well this week. I definitely think that is a game you're going to want to target this week. So I like Drew Brees. If you want to go 100 less off of Rodgers, don't mind him at 7,200. In that 6K range, don't have a ton of interest in Matt Ryan. 7K, I think if I'm going to pay that price tag, I'll just go up to Brees or Rodgers, or I'll go down to Kirk Cousins or Deshaun Watson, two guys I also have interest in this week. Starting off with Kirk Cousins, really good spot for him playing at home against the 49ers. Just not a good defense, definitely a defense you can pick on. So I think Kirk Cousins is a viable play this week as well. He did get off to a pretty rough start to begin the year. In his last two games against Oakland and Kansas City, 29 and 20 DraftKings points, 3 and 2 touchdowns in both of those games. Has thrown the ball 20 and 34 times through those two games. So I think Cousins is also in play here. If you just look at matchup, the 49ers, they've allowed 249.8 passing yards a game so far this year, which is towards the bottom of the league. So definitely a good spot for Kirk Cousins at 6,800. Now, I'm not sure how highly owned Cousins will be since Watson is right there in price. Watson's just 100 less. And I feel like Watson might be one of the most popular quarterbacks this week just because of how well he's played in the last two games, especially fantasy-wise, putting up 34 and 35 DraftKings points in his last two games. Now, that 35-point game against KC kind of was a little fluky. He only completed 16 passes in that game, still put up 5 touchdowns on only 16 completions. So definitely was a little fluky. Also had a lot of points come in garbage time. I believe at like halftime in that game, he only had like 7 fantasy points and then managed to put up 28 fantasy points in the second half. A lot came in garbage time when they really weren't playing for anything. I know he threw like a 50-yard bomb to DeAndre Hopkins just as time was expiring. They still lost the game, still lost by a touchdown, but that touchdown that he scored before the game ended didn't really help them, but it did help Watson fantasy-wise. And I'm sure a lot of people were watching that game, saw how well he played. So I feel like Watson might be one of the most popular quarterbacks this week. I definitely think he is a good play this week at 6,700. But I think that's a little bit too much to pay for him, even though it's a good matchup against Cleveland. I'd just rather find a little bit more salary, get up to BREES or Aaron Rodgers, who I just have a lot more confidence in, who I know are going to produce, whereas just taking a rookie. But I definitely think Watson is a good play this week, so I do like him at 6,700. And then one cheaper quarterback I did write down, not very, very cheap, still in the 6K range, but I think it's definitely in play. Probably the cheapest quarterback I'll be on this week will be Carson Palmer at 6,100, playing at home against Tampa Bay. Definitely a good spot for Palmer playing at home. We know Palmer plays well at home, and against a pretty bad Tampa Bay defense, a defense that's pretty bad against the pass. I think Palmer's in a good spot here. Tampa Bay, so far this year, they've allowed 309 passing yards a game, which is actually second to last in the league. So definitely a good spot for Palmer. I think he is in play if you are looking for a cheap quarterback. That's probably the cheapest I'll go. I did write down Bradford and Carr. I think these two guys are definitely in play, but I'm not sure if they'll be playing. I think Bradford should be playing, but not sure about Derek Carr. If Derek Carr plays, I think he's definitely an option at 5,900. I think Sam Bradford, if he is in there, I think he is also an option as well at 6K going up against Green Bay. But just under them, just not a lot of options I'm seeing. So the quarterbacks I have wrote down this week are Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Kirk Cousins, Deshaun Watson, and Carson Palmer. Those are 5 quarterbacks I'll be looking to target this week. But yeah, that's pretty much it for quarterback. Let's go ahead and move on to running back. All right, so for running back this week, I think this is going to be a position where you look to pay up. A lot of good expensive options up top. Not necessarily Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell is leading the pack at 9,600. I think this is a really tough spot for Bell, and he is also very expensive at 9,600. And I think there's some really good options in that upper 7K range and then the low 8K range, just under Bell. So I don't think I'm going to be on Le'Veon Bell this week. I know the guy has a ton of upside, but definitely a tough spot for him. Going to Kansas City, going to Arrowhead, really tough spot for the Steelers in general. So I'm going to be off of Bell this week. Have a lot of interest in Leonard Fournette. He is a core play for me this week. Really expensive at 8K, but it's a really good spot for him. Playing at home against the Rams, who have just not been good against the run this year. So far, they're allowing 133 rushing yards a game, which is bottom in the league, ranks 27th. So a really good spot for Leonard Fournette. And this guy is definitely worth the 8K price tag in my opinion. He just sees so much volume. He's rushing the ball a ton, getting over 20 attempts. Also involved in the passing game as well. He's getting some targets every week. So I really like this spot for Leonard Fournette. The guy's just been so solid all year, been so consistent. 24, 14, 17, 24, and 34 DraftKings points. And I know that 34 DraftKings point day against the Steelers last Sunday was a little fluky. He did have like a 90-yard run right before the game ended. Didn't really count. Sort of like Watson, sort of a garbage time run. But even if Fournette doesn't get that 90-yard run, he still had a really good day. So I think it's a really good spot for Leonard Fournette. Like I said, the Rams do struggle against the run. And playing at home, you would imagine Jacksonville could get up in this game, could lean on Fournette heavily. So I think it's a really good spot for him at 8K. He is a core play for me this week at running back. And then on the other side of that game, also have some interest in Todd Gurley as well. Going up against Jacksonville, a really good defense against the pass, but have really struggled against the run. Jacksonville definitely has one of the best passing defenses, but against the run, 146 rushing yards a game, which is towards the bottom of the league, ranks 31st. So also a really good spot for Todd Gurley. Gurley did sort of come back down to life last week against Seattle. Only put up 6 DraftKings points in that game. Really tough spot. Before that, 20, 27, 40, and 37 DraftKings points. So Gurley has also been so solid this year. He's also seen a ton of volume. Wasn't as heavily involved in against Seattle. Only rushed the ball 14 times. Only saw 4 targets. Before that game, he was getting over 20 carries a game. Also getting multiple targets as well. So definitely a good spot for Todd Gurley. I think he is also in play on the other side. Love him and Fournette this week. I wouldn't mind playing both of them in the same lineup. Even though playing 2 running backs in the same game doesn't seem like it would go well, I think that could work this week going with Fournette and Gurley. So I like both of them in the upper tier. I think they are 2 guys I'm definitely going to be targeting. And then just under Gurley, also love Devonta Freeman at home playing against Miami. Anytime Devonta Freeman's at home, you have to consider this guy. He's just so solid, especially when playing at home. And even on the road, Freeman's had some solid games this year. So far, he's put up 11, 24, 25, and 15 DraftKings points, just been really consistent. He sort of separated himself away from Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman really isn't as heavily involved as he was to begin the year. So I think Devonta Freeman definitely in play at 7,400. If you're looking to get a little contrarian, I would imagine he's going to be pretty low owned compared to Fournette and Gurley. So in GPPs, don't mind Devonta Freeman this week at 7,400. And they're looking for some cheaper running backs under 6K. I have 2 guys written down. The first guy is Jay Ajayi at 5,700 going up against the Falcons. It seems like I've been chasing this Jay Ajayi game for quite some time. I've been on him for 3 straight weeks. I've had exposure to him for 3 straight weeks. Hasn't really worked out. Against the Jets, only put up 4 DK points. Against the Saints, only put up 6. Against Tennessee, only put up 8. So Ajayi's been really inconsistent as of late. But he's still getting pretty heavy volume. Still ran the ball over 20 times against Tennessee. Also saw 3 targets as well in that game. So Ajayi is still heavily involved. Going up against Atlanta, I think it is a good spot for Ajayi, especially because Atlanta, they do struggle to running backs that can catch the ball out of the backfield. And Ajayi definitely can do that. He will see some targets from KITTLE. So I think Ajayi's in play, looking for an RB2 that you can pair with Fournette. I think he is an option at just 5,700. Then another running back I really like this week. If I don't play Deshaun Watson even, I wouldn't mind if you play him with Watson. But Lamar Miller at 5,400 going up against Cleveland. I think it's a really good spot for Lamar Miller, especially because I feel like the game script's going to favor him. I feel like Houston's going to definitely be able to get up in this game. And they could rely on Miller in the second half, could be running the ball a lot. And Miller has seen a pretty consistent workload through 5 games. He's rushed the ball 17, 18, 14, 19, and 15 times through 5 games, and also has seen some targets as well. So I think Lamar Miller's in a really good spot here. We know this Cleveland defense not very good. Definitely a defense you can pick on. So I like Lamar Miller here. I think he's a really good option as well if you want to pair him with Fournette, or if you want to go with Ajayi and then play Miller in your flex spot. Wouldn't mind that as well. So I also really like Lamar Miller. Looking for a cheap running back. I think he is in play this week at 5,400. But yeah, those are just some running backs I like this week. I wrote down Leonard Fournette, Todd Gurley, Devonta Freeman, Jay Ajayi, and Lamar Miller. Definitely some guys I think you should be targeting in your lineups. But yeah, that's pretty much it for running back. Let's go ahead and move on to wide receiver. Alright, so for wide receiver this week, I have 2 expensive guys written down, and then I have 3 guys in the mid-tier and lower range. The 2 expensive guys I have written down for this week are Julio Jones and DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think I'm going to have much exposure to AB this week at 9,300. I think he's just too expensive, and I think it's a tough spot for the Steelers in general, having to travel to KC, going to Arrowhead. I don't think I'm going to have much exposure to the Steelers at all this week. I actually really like the Chiefs defense. They're one of my favorite defenses on the week. So I don't think I'm going to be on AB. I just like some of these guys who are 1,000 less, being Julio Jones and DeAndre Hopkins. 2 guys I have a lot of interest in. But starting off with Julio Jones, 8,300. Going up against the Dolphins, I think it's a good spot for Julio, especially since Mohamed Sanu is going to be out for this game. I feel like Matt Ryan's going to have to give some targets out to other guys. Or we could just see him feed the ball to Julio more, which is something I definitely think Ryan could do. And Julio has yet to have a monster game this year. So far he's just been sort of up and down. Hasn't really had a monster game. Through 4 games, he's only put up 10, 18, 16, and 6 DraftKings points. Has yet to find the end zone this year. I keep saying that could change, but it really hasn't happened yet. But possibly this week, especially if Sanu is out, which is look like he's going to be. I think Julio Jones is a good option. I think Matt Ryan's going to feed him the ball a little bit more this week. There's not really anybody in that Miami secondary you're worried about, especially going up against Julio Jones. So I think Jones is a really good option if you want to pay up. I like him at 8,300. Also like DeAndre Hopkins at 8,100. Hopkins is very expensive, but this guy definitely is worth the 8K price tag. He just gets so many targets, and you know he's going to produce for you just because of how many targets he gets. Through 5 games this year, has seen 16, 13, 8, 12, and 12 targets. Has put up 18, 14, 14, 29, and 27 DraftKings points. Has just been so solid this year. It's obviously a good spot for him going up against the Browns. Just not a good secondary. Nobody in that secondary you're going to worry about going up against Hopkins. So I think if you want to pair him with Watson, I think that's a valuable option this week. It will be pretty expensive since Watson's like near 7K. Hopkins is over 8K. Definitely going to be an expensive stack. But with how well those two have played this year and how well they're connecting with each other, I think Watson to Hopkins, I think that's valuable this week if you want to pay up for that. So I think DeAndre Hopkins is in play if you're looking for an expensive wide receiver. I do like him at 8,100. And then some other wide receivers I like in the 6K range. Have one guy written down here. Actually, a core play for me this week is Jarvis Landry at 6,600 going up against the Falcons. I think it's a really good spot for Jarvis Landry. I think Landry is going to see a ton of targets this week, especially if DeVonta Parker is out for this game. Even with Parker playing so far this year, Landry is still seeing a ton of targets, 15, 11, 7, and 10 targets through 4 games. Has managed to put up 20, 10, 10, and 15 DraftKings points. So Landry has been so consistent this year, especially for PPR scoring, which is what DraftKings is. So I think he is a good option this week at 6,600. Since Landry does play in the slot, I would imagine he's going to be able to avoid Trufant, who is Atlanta's best corner. So I think it's a really good spot for Jarvis Landry, especially if DeVonta Parker doesn't play. I think Landry's going to see a ton of targets. Just 6,600, I think he's a good option, especially being DraftKings' full PPR scoring. And with how many catches Landry gets each week, I think he's a good option this week. So I like him in the 6K range. At 6,600. Then under 6K, I have 2 guys written down here. The first guy I like is Randall Cobb at 5,900, going up against the Vikings. I think this is a good spot for Randall Cobb. Sort of similar to Jarvis Landry, Cobb also does play in the slot. So I'd imagine he's going to be able to avoid Xavier Rhodes. I would imagine Rhodes is either going to be on Devontae Adams or Jordy Nelson. And whoever Xavier Rhodes is on is obviously going to have a tough time, which I think could open up some targets for Randall Cobb. I don't mind pairing him with Aaron Rodgers if you want to do that. I think he's a very viable option at 5,900. Hasn't really had any monster games this year. Has only put up 17, 13, 14, and 6 DraftKings points. But he's still seeing a pretty good amount of targets, 13, 9, 4, and 5 targets through 4 games. So I do like Randall Cobb this week at 5,900. Like I said, since Randall Cobb plays in the slot, I would imagine he's going to be able to avoid Xavier Rhodes. I would imagine Rhodes is either going to be on Devontae Adams or Jordy Nelson, which could free up some targets for Randall Cobb. Rodgers might sort of lean on Cobb since you don't really want to throw at Xavier Rhodes. So I think Randall Cobb's in play this week at 5,900. I like him in the mid-tier. And then sort of the cheaper tier, 5,200. Really like Will Fuller this week, going up against the Browns. Just really high on this Texans offense. I think a lot of good plays on that team this week. Will Fuller being one of them. Now, Fuller so far this year has had a pretty fluky start to the season. He's only caught 6 passes this year, but has 4 touchdowns with only 6 receptions, which is a little fluky. But Fuller is always in play, especially for GPPs, just because the guy has so much big play potential. If you watched that game on Sunday night, one of his touchdowns did come from a 40, 50-yard bomb from Watson. And going up against this Browns secondary you can definitely beat. I think Will Fuller is in play this week at 5,200. If you want to go a little contrarian, don't want to pair him with Hopkins, I obviously wouldn't recommend that. I think if you are playing Watson, you want to pair him with Hopkins. But maybe you go Watson, Hopkins, and Fuller if you want to do that. Or if you just want to go completely off the board, you want to go Watson to Fuller. Obviously, like I said, I wouldn't recommend that just because Hopkins is definitely the go-to guy for Watson. But Will Fuller is still seeing some targets, and he is still catching some passes for touchdowns. So I think he is in play at 5,200. Just looking to get more exposure to the Texans, a team I'm really high on this week. I do like Will Fuller at 5,200. And yeah, that's pretty much it for wide receiver. Those are just some wide receivers I like this week. I have written down Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, Jarvis Landry, Randall Cobb, and Will Fuller. Some guys you should be targeting. I think you should be getting into your lineups this week. But yeah, that's pretty much it for wide receiver. Let's go ahead and move on to tight end. Alright, so for tight end this week, this is going to be a position where I look to pay down. Not really interested in any of these expensive guys. Gronk is obviously a great play this week if he does play, but he is really expensive at $6,800. I don't think you want to pay that much at tight end. I think I'd rather just pay that at running back or receiver. So I'm not going to be on Gronk, not going to be on any of the expensive guys. Looking 4K and under for some tight ends. Have a couple guys written down. The first guy I like is Ryan Griffin at 4K going up against the Browns. The Browns are a team I look to attack, especially at tight end. They have been really bad against tight ends this year. The Browns and Giants specifically, two teams that have really struggled at tight ends. So I think Ryan Griffin's definitely a valuable option this week at 4K. He hasn't really seen a ton of targets since he's been starting. In the 3 games he started this year, only 6, 5, and 4 targets. But that one game he had against the Patriots did put up 17 DraftKings points in that game with his 6 targets. Got 61 yards and a touchdown. And like I said, Cleveland really struggles at tight end, so I think that makes Ryan Griffin a valuable option this week at 4K. I think he is in play, especially if you want to play Watson. You just want to go with the full Houston onslaught. I like Watson, Hopkins, Will Fuller, Ryan Griffin, even Lamar Miller. I like all those guys this week. So at tight end, I think Ryan Griffin is definitely in play at 4K. And then looking a little bit cheaper, I like Kyle Rudolph this week at $3,800 going up against Green Bay. I think it's a really good spot for Rudolph to get things going, especially since Sam Bradford is expected to be back for this game. And we know Rudolph does play well, especially when Bradford's throwing him the ball. So I think Rudolph is in play here at $3,800. This Green Bay secondary is just not good. Definitely a defense you can pick on. So at tight end, if you're looking under 4K, I do like Kyle Rudolph. Since Sam Bradford's going to be back, I think Rudolph is in play this week. $3,800. Then a core play for me at $3,500. Not sure how popular he will be, but I have a lot of interest in him this week. It's Austin Hooper at $3,500 going up against the Dolphins. Like I said earlier with Julio Jones, I think Jones is going to see a lot of targets this week. But I also think Austin Hooper could also be involved as well. Hooper really hasn't done much this year aside from his opening day game against the Bears. After that game, he's only put up 2, 2, and 10 DraftKings points. But in his last game against Buffalo, he did see 7 targets in that game, caught 5 passes for 50 yards. I think we could see Hooper sort of put up a similar outing to that one, especially since Mohamed Sanu is going to be out for this game. I think some guys are going to have to step up. Austin Hooper being one of them. We could see him some increased snaps. He could also see some more targets as well. So I think that makes him a valuable option at $3,500. He's a tight end I do have some interest in this week. I think he's going to be on the field a lot more, and I think he's going to see some more targets. So I like Austin Hooper at $3,500. And then just under him, the last guy I have written down is George Kittle at $3,400 going up against Washington. I think Kittle is an interesting play here. Going up against a Washington team that has been pretty bad against tight ends this year, I think Kittle is definitely a valuable option. He did have a pretty big game last week against Indianapolis, against the Colts. Got 9 targets in that game for 83 yards and 9 targets. Caught 7 passes for 83 yards. Had a touchdown as well. Put up 21.3 DraftKings points. So you would think that after that game, the 49ers will look to get Kittle more involved. And I think that makes him a good play this week at $3,400. And a pretty good matchup against a Washington team that has struggled to tight ends. So I like George Kittle at $3,400 if you are looking for a little bit cheaper tight end. But yeah, that's pretty much it for tight end. Those are some tight ends I have written down. I wrote down Ryan Griffin, Kyle Rudolph, Austin Hooper, and George Kittle. Some guys I think you should definitely be looking to target into your lineups. But yeah, that's pretty much it for tight end. Let's go ahead and move on to defense. Alright, so for defense this week, I have 3 defenses written down. I didn't write down the top 2 defenses, the Texans and the Ravens, just because I feel like those 2 defenses are so obvious. I think they are definitely in play if you can fit them in. But defense is always a position I look for in the mid-tier or I look to go cheap. But I definitely think the Texans and Ravens are 2 good viable options if you are looking to pay up. But looking a little bit cheaper in the mid-tier and towards the cheaper end, the first defense I have written down is the Falcons at $3,500, playing at home against the Dolphins. Although I have some interest in Jarvis Landry this week, I wouldn't mind taking the Falcons defense going up against Jay Cutler, who's just not a good quarterback, will turn the ball over, will get sacked a ton. And I also really like that the Falcons are playing at home. Always like to target defenses playing at home. So I think if you're looking in the upper 3K range, I do like the Falcons this week at 3,500. And then looking a little bit cheaper, I mentioned this earlier, I think the Chiefs are in a really good spot, especially their defense. I think the Steelers are going to have a tough time this week playing in Arrowhead. So I really like the Chiefs defense this week at 3,200. They're one of my favorite defenses on the week. I think it's just a really tough spot for the Steelers. Big Ben looked absolutely terrible last week against Jacksonville, had 5 interceptions in that game. And things aren't going to get any easier for him having to travel to Kansas City. Really tough spot for the Steelers. So I love this spot for the Chiefs. I think their defense is one of the best defense options on the week at 3,200. Playing at home, we know the Chiefs have a great home field advantage, have one of the loudest crowds in the NFL. So I think it's a really good spot for them. I think they're going to be able to get some sacks on Big Ben. He's also been throwing a ton of picks as well. I think he could throw another 1 or 2 this week against the Chiefs. So I love the Chiefs defense this week at 3,200. Think they're a really good option in the mid-tier at 3K range. And then under 3K, have one defense written down, 2,800. I definitely like the Cardinals this week. If you are looking for a little bit cheaper defense, I think they are in play. Playing at home against Tampa Bay, going up against Jameis Winston, who we know will turn the ball over a ton, will throw interceptions. Winston doesn't really care how covered a guy is. He'll still throw the ball into triple coverage. So I think that makes the Cardinals defense a viable option this week. Going up against a quarterback who will turn the ball over, I definitely think the Cardinals are in play. If you're looking under 3K, looking for a cheaper defense, I like them at 2,800. But yeah, that's pretty much it for defense. Just have 3 defenses written down: the Falcons, Chiefs, and Cardinals. Those are the 3 that I wrote down. Like I did mention, I like the Ravens, Texans. I think both of them are in play at the top, but I don't really like to pay up for defense. Always look to go cheap at defense. So I like the Falcons, Chiefs, and Cardinals this week. But yeah, that's pretty much it for defense. That's pretty much it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said earlier, let's try and get over 500 likes on the video. Would really appreciate it, guys. So make sure you do drop a like on the video. Be sure to subscribe as well if this is your first time on my channel. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, so that way you'll never miss out on any of my new videos. I will be doing NFL videos weekly, along with NBA videos as well. Once the NBA regular season starts, I will be making NBA videos daily. So make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, so that way you'll never miss out on any of my new videos. And also, one thing I want to mention real quick, be sure to follow me on Twitter as well if you haven't already. My Twitter is @thedfs_goat. If you look in the description, there is a link. You can just click on that link, go to my Twitter, give me a follow. Would really appreciate that as well. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you back for Week 7. Good luck this week, guys. Peace.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah, she shaking fast. Yeah, she dropping slow. What? Yeah, neck on fro. Whoa, 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 whoa.